Hello Planeswalkers, Andrew here, bringing you another Halloween-themed deck tech. Today we'll be looking at Jeleva, Nephalia's Scourge. Jeleva is a 1/3 vampire wizard for 1 and the full Grixis. She's got flying, and when she enters the field, each player exiles the top X cards of her library, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast her. Whenever she attacks, you can cast an instant or sorcery exiled with her without paying its mana cost. Needless to say, we're going to be playing Mill, and if you remember my Taste the Cardboard episode that featured Mill, you'll know that I came to the conclusion that Mill is the most despicable way to win a game, since decking someone out represents that player having absolutely no more thoughts or memories remaining. That is the exact reason I chose Jeleva for the hallowed month of Halloween. Let's kick things off with all the ways we have to mill our opponents. First off is Altar of the Brood, which says whenever another permanent enters under your control, each opponent mills a card. Ashiok, Sculptor of Fears, lets you draw a card and mill each player for 2, steal a creature from a graveyard, or steal all creatures an opponent controls. Bruvak, the Grand Delinquent, doubles up every time an opponent mills. Chill of Foreboding has everyone mill 5, with flashback for 7 and a blue, and Compelling Argument mills an opponent for 5 and has cycling for a blue. Countermand counters a spell and causes its controller to mill the top 4 cards of their library. Folio of Fancies removes everyone's hand limit and can be tapped for XX to make everyone draw X cards. Or you can tap it and pay 2 and a blue and mill each opponent for the number of cards in their hand. Fraying Sanity is a curse that you play on an opponent, and it causes them to mill cards equal to the number of cards put into their graveyard from anywhere this turn, and this happens on each end step. Mind Crank says whenever an opponent takes damage, they mill cards equal to the amount of damage they took. Teferi's Tutelage has you draw a card when it enters, and mills each opponent for 2 whenever you draw a card. Thief of Sanity is a flyer that, when it deals combat damage to a player, lets you look at the top 3 cards of their library, exile 1 face down, and then dump the other 2 into their grave. This does not count as milling. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may cast it and spend mana as if it were mana of any color to cast that spell. Lastly is Thieves' Guild Enforcer, which has Flash, and when her or another rogue enters the field under your control, each opponent mills 2. As long as an opponent has 8 or more cards in their grave, this creature gets +2/+1 and has Death Touch. Next are our tricks to play on our opponents this Halloween. This segment also brings the obligatory, "It's our deck." Blatant Thievery lets you take a permanent from each opponent, Clone Legion has you clone an opponent's entire army, and Cruel Ultimatum has an opponent sack a creature, discard 3 cards, and lose 5 life, while you return a creature from your grave to your hand, draw 3, and gain 5 life. Whenever Atali Primal Storm attacks, you exile the top card of each player's library, and lets you cast any number of spells from among them for free. It is for this exact reason that I have never ever gotten Atali to stick to the field. Homeboy is a lightning rod for removal. Gyruda, Doom of Depths, mills each player for 4 when it enters, and then you can put a creature card from among them onto the field under your control. Hostage Taker exiles an artifact or creature when it enters until she leaves the field. You can then cast the exiled card as long as it's exiled, and you can spend mana as if it were mana of any color to cast that spell. Mnemonic Betrayal exiles all cards from all opponents' graves and lets you cast those cards this turn, and spend mana as if it were mana of any color to cast those spells. At the start of the next end step, if any of those cards remain exiled, you return them to their owners' graves, then you exile Mnemonic Betrayal. Narset's Reversal copies an instant or sorcery and returns the original to its owner's hand. Notion Thief has Flash and just straight up steals every card draw from your opponents besides their first one on each of their draw steps. Oblivion Sower exiles the top 4 cards of an opponent's library, and then you can slap any number of lands from among them onto the field under your control. Peer into the Abyss has target player draw half of their library and lose half of their life, rounded up each time. You stared at the Abyss, and the Abyss stared back, and the Abyss stared back, and the Abyss stared back. Spell Twine exiles target instant or sorcery from your grave, and 1 from an opponent's grave, and copies them, letting you cast the copies for free, then exile Spell Twine. Thousand Year Storm copies your instants and sorceries for each other instant and sorcery you've cast before it this turn. Wild Ricochet changes the target of target instant or sorcery, then copies it and lets you choose new targets for the copy. Windfall has everyone discard their hand, then draw cards equal to the greatest number of cards pitched this way. Worst Fears lets you control a player on their next turn, then you exile this card. Next we'll be looking at our utility for this deck. Bear in mind that Jeleva lets you cast any instant or sorcery exiled with her ability for free, including our first utility spell, Army of the Damned, which makes a whopping 13 tapped black zombie tokens. It's also got Flashback. Bolas' Citadel lets you look at the top card of your deck anytime, and you can play it at the cost of life equal to its mana cost. You can also tap and sack 10 non-land permanents to cause each opponent to lose 10 life. Charmbreaker Devils returns a random instant or sorcery from your grave to your hand on each of your upkeeps, and it gets +4/+0 for the turn whenever you cast an instant or sorcery. Dark Petition grabs you a card from your deck and adds it to your hand, then if there are 2 or more instants or sorceries in your grave, add 3 black to your mana pool. Double Vision copies your first instant or sorcery on each turn. Galvanoth lets you look at the top card of your library at the start of each of your upkeeps, then if it's an instant or sorcery, you can play it for free. Impulse has us look at the top 4 cards of our deck, and put 1 into our hand and the rest on the bottom of our library. Increasing Vengeance, which I initially misread as Increasing Violence, copies an instant or sorcery spell, and if the original was cast from your grave, you copy it twice instead. It also has Flashback. Kess, Dissident Mage, has Flying, and during each of your turns you can cast an instant or sorcery from your grave. If a card cast this way would be put into your grave, you exile it instead. Nightscape Familiar makes your blue and red spells 1 cheaper, and you can regenerate it for 1 and a black. Panharmonicon is here mainly to double up Jeleva's ETB, causing everyone to mill twice the amount of mana you spent on her when she enters. Ral, Storm Conduit, hits an opponent or planeswalker for 1 when you copy an instant or sorcery, and you can either scry to or copy your next instant or sorcery. Shark Typhoon makes an XX blue shark token with flying when you cast a non-creature spell, and does the same thing when you cycle it. This time X is a part of its cycling cost. Strionic Resonator can be paid into and tapped to copy a triggered ability, which is yet another way to copy Jeleva's ETB. Swarm Intelligence copies your instants and sorceries. Twinning Staff adds an extra copy whenever you copy a spell, and it can be paid into and tapped to copy an instant or sorcery you control. Now we move on to our defensive spells, some of which are worth casting off of Jeleva's ability. Blasphemous Act costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the field and hits every creature for 13. Chaos Warp is a sort of removal spell that has a chance to replace or remove permanent. We run Counterspell and Croesus Charm, which lets you either bounce a permanent, destroy a non-black creature, or destroy an artifact. And Didn't Say Please is a counterspell that also mills the controller of the countered spell for 3. Fierce Guardianship is a free counterspell if you have your commander, and Force of Negation lets you pitch a blues card from your hand to counter a spell. Alternatively, you can run other, cheaper counterspells in these 2 slots. In Garruk's Wake, destroys all creatures and planeswalkers you don't control. Miscast can counter an instant or sorcery, and Terminate destroys a creature. Mana and Card Advantage are next, starting with Ad Nauseam, which lets you reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand, and you lose life equal to its CMC. You can repeat it any number of times. Arcane Signet taps for any of our colors. Brainstorm draws us 3 cards and then we put 2 back on top of the deck. And Chromatic Lantern taps for any color and lets our lands tap for any color. Diabolic Tutors, well, a tutor. Mind's Desire shuffles our deck and exiles the top card of the deck, letting us play that card for free, and Mirari lets us copy our instants and sorceries for 3 mana. Ponder has us look at the top 3 cards of our deck, put them back in any order, shuffle the deck if we choose, then draw a card. Sol Ring's the classic mana rock, and Volcanic Vision returns an instant or sorcery from our grave to our hand, then deals damage equal to its CMC to each creature your opponents control. But then you must exile Volcanic Vision. For our mana base, we've got Bojuka Bog, which exiles all of a player's graveyard, Command Tower, Crumbling Necropolis, Dimir Aqueduct that returns a land to your hand when it enters and taps for Dimir, Evolving Wilds can be cracked to find us a basic land, Exotic Orchard taps for any color an opponent's land could make, and Is It Boilerworks is the same as Dimir Aqueduct, except it's, big shocker, is it? Mystic Sanctuary enters tapped unless you have 3 or more other lands, and when it enters untapped, You can grab an instant or sorcery from your grave and put it on your deck. Rakdos Carnarium is like the Aqueduct and Boiler Works. Reliquary Tower removes your hand limit, Temple of Deceit, Temple of Epiphany, and Temple of Malice are scry lands, and finally, Temple of the False God taps for 2 if we control 5 or more lands. We've got 9 islands, 6 mountains, and 6 swamps. And now you're equipped to pull the memories out of your opponent's minds, and win by decking them out, like the monster you are. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment. It helps us out a lot. If you want to see more from us in the future, think about throwing a sub our way. Have a great day, y'all.